Okay, welcome back in. I'm going to continue my basically 32 and 32-ish little series that I like to make. This time I'll be going back to the AFC side of things and we'll be looking at the Cleveland Browns. So you can see they finished fourth in the AFC North, basically last in their division, and they would finish second last in the AFC, and they were the third worst team in football this past season. So at least they weren't dead last in every category, just in their division. So you can see they finished this past year with a 3-14 record. A very disappointing season considering they made the playoffs last year, and there was a lot of hope that this team would make some noise this past season, but unfortunately, it was not meant to be. So I'll take a look at the regular season. As always, I always skip the preseason because that means absolutely jack squat when it comes to that. So they lost their week one matchup to Dallas. They bounced back the following week, getting to 1-1 after they beat the Jaguars. They would go on a 5-game losing streak after that, dropping to 1-6. And at that point, they pretty much knew their season was out of reach. They finally would go and defeat the Ravens, ending that 6-game slide, or 5-game losing skid. But then once they beat the Ravens, they would go on to lose to the Chargers. And then after their bye week, they would head into New Orleans. And unfortunately, they lost to the Saints as well. So they would go on to defeat Pittsburgh in week number 12. And then after that, you can take a look at all the L's. And it all started with their loss in Denver. So they would finish this season on a 6-game losing streak. So a very poor season to say the least. Now, am I surprised? Yes, but no at the same time, because that AFC North is just ridiculously stacked with a lot of good teams. The Ravens are always going to be competitive as long as Lamar Jackson is healthy. In my opinion, the Bengals, even though they just missed out on the playoffs, they're still going to be competitive as long as Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are on that team. And the Steelers, I feel like they kind of overachieved a little bit this year, but I will talk more about the Steelers obviously when I do my review with Pittsburgh. So the Browns, it seemed like they really had an uphill hill to climb right out of the gate. And that after going on several those two losing streaks, that pretty much derailed their season. Now, the one thing for the Browns that is going to be a question mark going forward, and it's always been a question mark for this team. I can't remember the last time they, aside from maybe Baker, that when they had a legitimate number one quarterback. I can't think of it. They signed Deshaun Watson 2 years ago because they thought he was the key piece to this team being competitive again and hopefully making the playoffs. But in his tenure, he's never he either wasn't successful or this past year he just got hurt for the majority of the season. So that's why when I'm looking at the stats, that's why you see Jameis Winston up there and not Deshaun Watson, because Watson went down early in the year. He was done, and now it's speculated that he might miss next year, even though we're only in January. And they're talking about how he can miss a full season upcoming. And with that contract, that ridiculous contract, again, I can't rant enough about bad contracts. Like, teams should learn lessons from other teams. Like, oh, they paid this guy so much money and he's injured all the time or he's not playing that well. Let's not make that same mistake. I don't care if the salary cap is going through or if certain teams have more money than others. I don't think there's a salary cap in the NFL. There can't be, because didn't Mahomes sign like almost a $500 million contract like 2 years ago? So obviously certain teams are going to be richer than others, but for Cleveland, man, like if you're a Browns fan, it feels like every year aside from last year when they made the playoffs, is like a kick to the groin. They just, no matter what they do, no matter how hard they try, they just can't seem to get out of their own shell. I don't know, like Cleveland to me, it's just like a tongue twister. I just can't figure it out. Like no matter how much I try, how much I practice, I just can't figure it out. And they just can't figure it out themselves. So many bad decisions when it comes to signings, trades, whatever it is, but signings mostly. And yeah, I feel bad if you're a Browns fan because last year was supposed to be a step forward, and then this year you ended up taking two steps backwards. And if Watson's gone, if they don't bring back Winston, who is going to be their quarterback of the future? Do they draft somebody? Do they go and try to sign somebody in the offseason? There's just a lot of questions with this team. Just as many questions as for the Browns as there is for the Titans, because I don't know what there is to fix. Like I don't know where you even start. Sorry, I shouldn't say what you need to fix. Everything needs to be fixed. But where do you start? Where do you start? And yeah, like I can't get upset if a player signs a deal. I'd be more upset with the owners and management and coaches that say, hey, let's give this person a 30, 40, $50 million contract or a $200 million contract and see where it goes. Like it bites you in the rear every single time. So like I'll just put it this way and then I'll show you the stats for the Browns. But if I'm a GM of a team or I have any influence on signing and money and all that other stuff, I would rather just do a short-term contract. Do a 2-year, 3-year contract, pay a little bit. Like I feel that if people took a little bit of a pay cut, then maybe teams could afford to bring in other players, whether it's on defense, special teams, offense, whatever it is. But once you start handing out these 7-figure deals plus 8-figure deals, whatever it is, 9-figure deals, I don't know. I have no idea how much players make, but I know it's a lot. But once you start filling out basically like a blank check and you're saying you give a player, hey, you put what a number down on that check and we'll pay you that. Like, no, don't stop. Just stop. And that's just not for football. That's for any sport. Like just do a short-term contract every single time. Do a 2 or 3 year deal every single time. Because if you sign somebody for a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year deal, I don't know what the cap is or what the yearly cap is when it comes to the NFL. But if you pay someone a lot of money now, they're not going to be that good 6, 7, 8 years into that contract. As a matter of fact, they're going to start regressing because unfortunately, Father Time doesn't mess around. And as you start creeping up to your early to mid 30s, you're not worth, in my opinion, the money that you got paid initially for that contract. So again, I can't hate a player for signing a contract because if someone were to offer me millions of dollars, I'd probably sign in 2 seconds. I wouldn't hesitate. So I can't get mad at a player for signing a contract, but I can get mad at management, coaches, whoever draws up the contract, owners, whatever the case may be is, and say, smarten up because that's your money being wasted on somebody. And in this case, for Deshaun Watson, he like I said, he missed out probably half of the year this past year. He's missing next year. And Cleveland's not getting any of that money back. And I have no idea how much longer his contract is, but if they ever decide to cut ties with Watson, which they should, then that's going to be a lot of dead cap money, and they're going to be in dead cap hell. And you know how I can relate? Because I'm a Broncos fan, and that Russell Wilson contract is still haunting us, and it's going to ruin us for another year. I think after next year, we'll finally be free of that ridiculous contract. And I still can't rant enough about why would you pay somebody so much money before they even step foot on a football field. It just blows my mind. Anyways, that was like a 5-minute rant that I probably shouldn't have said. But again, there's been a lot of bad signings, not just from the Browns, but from other teams as well. But unfortunately, the Browns, they have made their fair share of bad signings, to say the least. So anyway, now get back to the stats. So Jameis Winston, who took over the starting job for Watson, would finish with 2,121 yards. He would finish with a 61.15% completion, 13 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. So I don't know if you remember back in, I think it was the 2019-20 season when Winston led the league in touchdowns. You're thinking if a guy led the league in touchdowns, he should be the MVP. But he also led the league with interceptions. So it feels like his touchdown to interception ratio is very close. Like a lot of good quarterbacks, or a lot of quarterbacks, they might have like 20 touchdowns to 10 picks, like almost like a 2-to-1 ratio. But for Winston, it's like 1-to-1. It's like for every touchdown he throws, he's guaranteed to throw a pick. So You take the good with the bad. Jared Jeudy in his first season with the Cleveland Browns since being traded from the Broncos last offseason would finish with 1,229 yards. He had 90 receptions and 4 touchdowns. And I'll still never forget the game against the Broncos. He had like over 200 yards receiving in that game alone. And that was the best statistical thing or stat from a player going up against his former team. So I'm sure he's pretty proud about that. Elijah Moore would finish with 538 receiving yards. He had 61 receptions and just 1 touchdown. Jerome Ford, the running back, would finish with 565 rushing yards. He had 104 attempts and 3 touchdowns. Now, Nick Chubb was injured for most of the year, so he would only finish with 332 rushing yards. He had 102 rushing attempts and 3 touchdowns on the ground. Now take a look at the defense. Myles Garrett. He would finish with 14 sacks, which is still unbelievable for one individual. 40 tackles, 3 forced fumbles. Grant Delpit would finish with 66 tackles. He had 1 sack. And Denzel Ward, the cornerback, would finish with 2 picks, 41 tackles, 1 forced fumble, and 1 pass deflection. So I'd say he's a pretty darn good defender for the Browns. And we look at their special teams, so just the kicker and the punter respectively. So Dustin Hopkins would finish the season with 18 field goals on 27 attempts, so he missed 9. Therefore, his field goal percentage would be 66.67. And as for the punter, Corey, Bo Jorquez, yeah, he would finish 4,387 yards. 89 punts, and his average punt would be roughly 50 yards. So again, if your punter is getting more yards than your quarterback, then you're probably not having the best season, if I'm going to be honest with you. Okay, so I feel like I should end the video now before I say any more negative things about the Browns, but going into next year, I think it'll be tough again because I still think that the Ravens and Bengals should finish 1 and 2 respectively. Now, if the Browns can, stay healthy and maybe make some good decisions in the offseason, they could compete against the Steelers. I know a lot of Steelers fans will probably shake their heads or like say, no, that's not going to be possible. But you really don't know what the future for the Steelers are because Russell Wilson's contract was a 1-year deal. Because he played so poorly towards the end of the year, did they really give him another chance? And if they do, then what are they doing with Justin Fields? So, the Browns could also finish 4th again, and the Steelers could jump back up to 3rd in that division again, or 2nd, whatever it is. But I just think the first 2 teams are definitely going to be the Ravens and the Bengals, respectively. The 3rd and 4th spot is kind of up for grabs. If I had to make my prediction now, I'd say probably Baltimore, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland should be the 1 through 4 teams in the AFC North next year. But again, anything can happen. Injuries do plague certain teams. So if other players and other teams happen to get hurt, then obviously that could help the Browns' chances of getting ahead of them and the standings. But if I'm going to be completely honest and realistic, I think this team might be going through yet another rebuild, which they don't need. But if they don't bring Winston back and Watson ends up being gone, who is their quarterback moving forward? And if you don't have a quarterback, you're not winning a whole lot of games. All right, I feel like I've talked enough about the Browns, almost 14 minutes when it comes to them. So yeah, as always, if you're new to this channel and you like this type of content, feel free to hit the sub button. I'd be very grateful and very appreciative. Until next time, and as always, take care.